When deeply suppressed information finally breaches the confines of a rigid, closed system, it moves outward with sudden, violent speed. But the infrastructure for this release was built long before it caught the public's attention. In 2006, Tarana Burke initiated #MeToo as a grassroots support network, creating a framework for marginalized survivors of sexual violence to share their experiences. For over a decade, this vital work operated locally, below the threshold of global media. Then, in 2017, the scale of disclosure broke systemic barriers. The catalyst was the exposure of Harvey Weinstein. Investigative reporting documented decades of systemic, unchecked abuse, revealing how a single powerful executive could utilize corporate infrastructure to silence victims. Actors like Alyssa Milano pushed Burke's original framework into the digital network. By applying the phrase to their own experiences, individuals aggregated their isolated disclosures into a massive collective dataset. The movement has matured into a structural reform framework, actively dismantling how modern institutions distribute and audit power. To understand how this reform functions, we have to examine the environments where power is most concentrated, specifically healthcare and academia. These fields require rigid, traditional hierarchies to operate safely. A trainee must follow the precise directives of an attending physician to ensure patient safety and master complex procedures. However, this creates a structural paradox. The exact chain of command required to transfer specialized knowledge also engineers an environment exceptionally vulnerable to coercion. In organizational science, this is defined as an authority gradient. It measures the steepness of the power differential between a superior and a subordinate. In medicine and academic research, this gradient is nearly vertical. Senior faculty and attending physicians hold absolute authority over junior researchers and medical residents. When harassment persists for decades in these fields, we are not looking at an anomaly of bad actors. We are observing an organizational architecture that actively shields misconduct from scrutiny. Let's remove the emotional layer and analyze the institution as a purely structural engineering problem. This diagram maps the top-down chain of command in an academic hospital. Authority flows exclusively downward. Isolating the link between attending physician and trainee reveals the authority gradient's danger. The senior gatekeeper controls evaluations, mentorship access, and vetoes career advancement. If implicit coercion or harassment is introduced into this specific dynamic, the subordinate is trapped. This exposes the fatal flaw of standard compliance protocols. Asking a trainee to report misconduct often means demanding they report directly to, or through, the person who holds total leverage over their career. Within an unmitigated authority gradient, a lack of reported complaints does not indicate a healthy workplace. Silence is a forced survival mechanism. This survival mechanism is driven by retaliation risk, which is a highly rational fear of professional destruction. A whistleblower faces precise, measurable consequences: skewed evaluation bias, immediate loss of critical mentorship, and blacklisted from future fellowship opportunities. This flowchart illustrates why legacy compliance systems failed. The primary failure is procedural opacity. Investigations occur behind closed doors, keeping victims in the dark. Even with a favorable conclusion, disciplinary actions are insufficient, leaving the senior figure and threat intact. These legacy structures lacked survivor-centered approaches for a clear reason. They were designed by legal departments to protect the institution from financial liability. Legacy compliance systems successfully executed their primary design, neutralizing threats to the established hierarchy. #MeToo functioned as the external force that forcibly disrupted this closed loop. It operates on 3 distinct pillars. This map illustrates the first pillar: the exposure of structural power asymmetry. The movement forces institutions to visually acknowledge the existence and the exact location of dangerous authority gradients. The second pillar amplifies survivor voices. Normalizing public disclosure shatters the stigma isolating complaints. This generates horizontal collective advocacy. Trainees realize they share identical experiences, allowing them to link directly with peers, entirely bypassing the vertical chain of command. The third pillar is institutional and legal reform. This collective horizontal pressure becomes too immense for the legacy system to absorb, forcing actual policy changes. This results in tangible governance outcomes: strengthened whistleblower protections, revised sexual harassment laws, and entirely new baselines for professional ethics. Operating together, these three pillars achieve a specific mechanical outcome. They convert isolated victimhood into a collective force capable of imposing structural accountability. We can prove this framework is not constrained by Western cultural norms. It exposes identical structural flaws worldwide. In Taiwan, across 2023 and 2024, a massive wave of disclosures provided a high-stakes case study of this global audit in action. The disclosures systematically permeated the political, media, and academic sectors, forcing a rigid society to publicly examine the conduct of its leadership. This wave had to overcome immense cultural barriers specific to East Asia, notably a deeply ingrained deference to hierarchy and intense pressure to protect professional reputations at all costs. Yet, the structural pressure yielded concrete governance outcomes. Lawmakers accelerated the refinement of sexual harassment prevention laws, institutions restructured their investigative procedures, and victims secured enhanced legal protections. The Taiwan case study proves the mechanical efficiency of the movement. It functions as a universal audit, capable of forcing legislative modernization even in environments defined by absolute hierarchical deference. Recalibrating the established power dynamics of legacy professions generates intense systemic friction. Modern leadership now faces a difficult tension, balancing the overwhelming public demand for immediate accountability against the legal necessity of due process. When victims resort to public disclosures, often called trial by media, it is rarely a first choice. It is a predictable symptom of a workforce that has completely lost faith in internal procedures. There is also intense institutional anxiety regarding false allegations. While statistically rare, they are socially amplified, leading to inconsistent enforcement and defensive policy drafting. These debates do not invalidate the framework. They highlight the inevitable growing pains of an organization transitioning from absolute opacity to functional transparency. This chart represents the post-Me Too institutional model. Power no longer flows exclusively from the top down. By establishing an independent oversight node, we create transparent reporting paths that completely bypass immediate supervisors, neutralizing retaliation risk. This architecture enforces three new baseline standards for high-stakes environments: rigorous professional responsibility, strict leadership accountability, and organizational transparency. Equity-centered design prioritizes the integrity of the hierarchy over reputational defense, transforming compliance into a mechanism for active accountability. The true legacy of Me Too is the ethical modernization of the workplace. It has built the blueprint for a system where necessary power asymmetry can no longer be weaponized in silence.